Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday morning class. We usually teach Tanya at this class, but being that we're just a day away from Purim, I'll share with you a Purim thought. It's a little late, and I apologize for the late hour. So, as I mentioned, Purim tells the story of a king, Achashverosh, the king of Persia. He was a superpower at the time, was the king of all the provinces, and his kingdom extended throughout the civilized world. And he threw a banquet to celebrate his third anniversary of being king, because he was always just worried that his kingdom wouldn't last. It would be shaken up. And when he reached 3 years, he felt that it was well established, and he threw a banquet that was legendary. He invited everyone, and it lasted for a half a year. When the half a year came to an end and the party was over, he made another banquet, at which time he invited his the people of the capital city, Shushan. And he was very generous at this party. He was he gave orders that everyone should be given what they wanted. If the Jews would come, they should be served kosher food and so on. And he just, he felt large, and he wanted everyone to be happy. And the Jews were they were happy to be invited to this banquet, because when they felt that they felt honored that the king invited them, and they didn't want to miss out on it. And they enjoyed the party. And Mordechai, the Medrash tells us, Mordechai had told them not to go to this party. The reason he told them not to go to the party was for a number of reasons, but the one big reason was because this story happens after the destruction of the first temple, before the second temple is rebuilt. Before they built the second temple. So it's in that interim period where they were in exile, first in Babylonia, and then it was conquered by the Persians, which Achashverosh, the king, was the king of the Persian Empire. So when they destroyed the temple, they took with them, they stole all the different sacred items that were in the temple. And they brought it to Babylonia and later became Persian, now it's under the Persians. And Achashverosh, in his audacity, displayed these sacred items at this banquet, which was a terrible desecration of God's name. Right? And Mordechai, the Jew, the holy Jew, Mordechai told the Jews in Shushan not to go to this party. He knew that this was not a place for the Jewish people. But they went anyway. And they couldn't withstand that, they felt, honored, you get invited to the White House, and I'm not going to go, So they all went, Nebuch. And the Talmud tells us that God was very, very upset. And in the words of the Talmud, because they enjoyed that party, God, a decree of annihilation was now passed in heaven. Total annihilation of the entire people. And of course, the sages ask, even if they ate, even if you're going to tell me that they went to the party and they shouldn't have been at that banquet and so on. There was a desecration of God's name with the display of the holy items of the temple and all that. And even if there would be non-kosher food, nowhere in the Torah does it say that if you eat not kosher and you go to a party and you enjoy a party of a non-Jew, you get the death penalty. And not only the people went to get the death penalty, but the entire nation now is under such a threat. It seems that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. There are certain sins in the Torah that if you violate them and you do them, you get the death penalty. It's a capital offense. Granted, there are certain sins like that, but not this one. Eating by the banquet of a non-Jew, especially that we're told that the food was kosher. So what was the reason that God got so upset and that in heaven they allowed for a decree of annihilation to be passed? It makes no sense, right? So before I answer that, let me tell you the rest of the story. It's an interesting story. You'll read it tomorrow night in the Megillah and on Tuesday, but still, we'll fill you in a little bit, give you a little a heads up, a head start. At this banquet, Achashverosh got drunk. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that back in the day, it seems that the custom was that the king would make a party for the men in one part of the palace, and the women, the queen, would make her own party for the women in a different part of the palace. That alone is interesting because today we see that as, the Orthodox Jews do that. But I guess that was the custom of the time. And the king got drunk, as I said, and he sent a message to Vashti, his queen, that she should come appear before all the men in a way that was immodest, undressed. That was his, wanted to show her off to the whole. Oh, wow. And she refused. Why did she refuse? So it's interesting what the Medrash tells us, what the Talmud tells us. She wouldn't have refused if everything would be normal. This is what the type of people we're dealing with here. There's really, horrible people. She would have agreed to appear before the king that way. And actually it says that she went to prepare herself for this. But she was an evil woman. It says that she tortured the Jewish women, maids, the Jewish girls that worked in the palace. She made them work on Shabbos. She was an evil person. So God punished her. And while she was preparing to appear before the king, suddenly she had leprosy developed on her skin. Oh. And she wasn't obviously going to go out in public. So she refused the king. She refused only because of that. In other words, if she would not have had been this malady wouldn't have been, she wouldn't have been struck with the malady, she would have appeared. So this is what kind of people we're dealing with.
It seems weird that Hashem created that leprosy on it, yet they had a decree to annihilate the Jews.
Hold on. One thing has nothing to do with the other. She deserves her punishment. But you'll see in a minute how God is pulling the strings together over here. God's hands is involved in nature over here, because look what happens next. She refuses the king. Now the king is enraged. No one refuses the king, right? And here his own wife, his own queen, refused him. So he quickly gathered the council of Shushan, his own advisors and ministers, and what do you do to a woman that violates the king's orders? And of course Haman speaks up, Haman the villain, and he says we should kill her. Because if she gets away with this will be set as a bad precedent, and other women will mistreat their husbands, and this is the mindset. So they had her killed. The king went along with this plan and killed her. Mm-hmm. Then he sobered up.
I thought he banished
and when he sobered up,
I thought he banished her.
He killed her. He had her killed. And then he sobered up. And when he sobered up, he realized what he's done. And he felt he felt alone. He's killed his wife, So he had to choose for a new wife. So the second chapter in the Megillah tells us that he made this whole beauty contest, and girls came, and he was going to choose for himself a wife, and he did. Who did he choose? None other than Queen Esther. And Queen Esther now it says a miracle happened, because it says that actually Queen Esther was not the nicest woman in the world, at least according to one opinion. Yet she found favor in his eyes, and he married her, and she became the queen. She never tells him that she's Jewish. Her uncle Mordechai, or her cousin, I think it was her uncle, told her not to tell him. So God has arranged now that in the palace, a Jewess should be there, and a good Jew, a holy Jewess. Esther was one of the holiest women ever. To make the long story short, this Haman was a good politician, a good lobbyist, and he knew how to rub shoulders with the right people, and he worked his way up to become the highest minister and officer in the kingdom of Achashverosh. And he was given tremendous, tremendous power.
What's his name again?
Haman.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the king ordered that he should be almost like a king. That he walks by, you have to bow to him. I mean, literally, this is what... And Haman and he would go, and everyone would follow the orders of the king, except for one man. Mordechai. Mordechai was a Jew. He's not bowing to anyone other than God. And he refused to bow to Haman. And that enraged Mordechai, that enraged Haman. And he plotted against Mordechai. And he found out that Mordechai was a Jew. See, now he's of course, he didn't really like the Jews to begin with. So now the leader of the Jewish people is behaving this way. He decided he's going to figure out a way to get rid of the whole Jewish people. And he went to Achashverosh, plotted this thing together with him. And Achashverosh in his silliness agrees to get rid of the Jewish people. And they pass a decree, sends letters all over the kingdom, that on this and this day, the entire Jewish nation is to be wiped out. Completely. Mordechai finds out about it, goes to the palace, he starts screaming and wailing and he's crying. And Esther doesn't know what happened. Her uncle is behaving in a way that, what's going on? She finds out about this. So she has to go to the king and plead on behalf of her people. And first she doesn't want, and Mordechai tells her, you have no choice. If you don't, how are you going to go down in history? You're going to miss this opportunity. I spoke about this yesterday. And she goes, and she decrees, she asks Mordechai to institute a 3-day fast day, which happened to be on Pesach. They fasted that year on Pesach. And she also fasted 3 days, which is an unbelievable thing if you think about it. What was the reason she told Mordechai, I can't go? The reason she said she can't go was because she said the rule in the palace was that you can't come uninvited. You have to have an invitation. Even the wife, even the queen. And she says, I haven't been invited to the king for 30 days already. So if I just come and show up, he's obviously not interested in me right now. He hasn't invited me for 30 days already. So I'm not sure that I'm going to, he'll kill me. The rule was if you showed up uninvited, you'd get the death penalty. There was no... She says, I'm putting my life in danger. She says, you have no choice. You have to do it. The people are, So she goes. But she fasts for 3 days before she goes. Could you imagine? If you have to go to the king and you're at his mercy, and you're not sure that he's going to even be interested in you, the last thing you want to do is fast for 3 days and make yourself look horrible. If you can do anything, you go to the beauty parlor, you get yourself a nice, whatever you call it, make yourself up and dress up nice and try to look your best so that he takes an interest. What does she do? She goes and fasts together with all the Jewish people for 3 days. Can you imagine? 72-hour fast? It's not a morning to night fast. 3 days straight. That's a very, very long time. And you can imagine what she looked like at the end of 3 days, not eating. Even if she made herself up, she would look dreary and tired and exhausted and sick. Forget about exhausted. 3 days not eating. But that's what she did, which we'll talk about soon too. She goes in, she tells the king's son, miraculously, so happy to see her. And he's very happy, and he says, what can I do for you? Anything you ask. And she asks she invites him and Haman to the party. she's going to make a party, and at the party she'll tell Haman, and she'll tell Achashverosh what she wants. Comes to the party, and Haman is so happy. He's the man that's invited to the party in an inner circle with the king and the queen. And at the party, she still doesn't disclose what she wants. She tells the king, I want to make another party tomorrow. And tomorrow at the next party, I'll tell you. And that night was a fateful night. The night between the two parties was a fateful night. The king couldn't fall asleep. Now, I forgot to tell you one detail. At one point, there was two ministers, two guys working in the palace that plotted to kill the king. And Mordechai, they poisoned him. They were going to poison him. And Mordechai overheard them talk about it. So he went right away and told Esther to tell the king that his life is in danger. They caught the two men, they hung them, and they killed them, and the king was saved. So the king wrote that down. He remembered that Mordechai saved him. Now we go back to that night. The king can't sleep. He can't fall asleep. He can't fall asleep. And he wakes up, and he doesn't wake up because he didn't sleep to begin with, but he's agitated. He asks what's going on, and they start reading his diary. He said, let her read the diary, and he found in the diary that Mordechai had saved him many years earlier. So at that point, as this is all happening, Haman came to the palace. I guess it was in the wee hours of the morning. He couldn't wait already. He wants to come tell the king that he has a great plan. He wants to hang up Mordechai. As part of the decree to kill all the people, the leader should be hung on the gallows. And he's rushing to the king's palace to bring him the good news that he came up with this brilliant plan. And he's sure the king's going to agree. Why not? He agreed to kill all the Jews. Why wouldn't he agree to hang Mordechai? And it was at that moment that the king was now reminded that Mordechai had saved his life. So the king calls him in. He says he talks to Mordechai. To Haman, he asks, what should, tries to get some advice from him. He wants to reward someone. He wants to reward him. So he asks Haman, what would you do to honor someone that you feel indebted to? Haman thinks, of course, he means him, because who is the king indebted to if not the Haman? So he comes up with this brilliant plan that the king should order that they bring the royal horse, the royal chariot, and the royal crown, and they should dress up this man in this royal garb and this whole, panache and this whole thing, and ride him in the city streets and the squares, and announce that this is the man that the king loves and wants to honor, and so on. He thinks this is going to happen, that he's the man, he's an arrogant person, Haman, you can see. But the king tells him to go do that exactly. I love your idea. And go do that to Mordechai, because he's the one I want to honor right now. Can you imagine how things are starting to turn? Haman, who wants to come now and tell the king that he has a brilliant way to kill Mordechai and disgrace him, is now going to be the one to lead Mordechai through the city square and then announce. But he has no choice because the king told him to do it, so he does it. And Mordechai, Haman is feeling, he realizes that this is bad news, it's starting to turn, right? The wheel is turning. And his wife tells him, listen, these Jews, when things start going good for them, it's bad, you're not gonna get through this well. She kind of tells him, this is not going good for you. Anyway, she goes to the next day's party, right? And at that party, Esther finally discloses her true identity, that I'm a Jew, and this Haman wants to destroy me, and the king is now enraged like you never saw him. He gets up and he runs out into the vineyard, the royal vineyard, and he's so angry, and Haman now realizes that his life is on the line, because the king is now angry at him for wanting to kill the queen, because she's Jewish. And to make the long story short, he comes in, he's not having any of it, and he, instead of hanging Mordechai on the gallows, he orders that Haman should be hung on the gallows, and that was the end of him. And Esther then, was together with Mordechai, got the king to write new letters that the Jews have the right to defend themselves, and the decree was, and everything turned around. It was a wonderful holiday, and that's why we have Purim. Now, so in the beginning of the story, I just wanted to basically tell you the general basics of the story. After that, Mordechai becomes the viceroy of Shushan. But I want to share with you an insight on the beginning of the story. Which is not beginning, the whole story. I mentioned to you that the sages tell us that God allowed this decree to happen because the Jews enjoyed the party, the banquet that they were invited to. Right? Mm-hmm. And I asked you the question, why is it, what's the justice here? It's one thing if you kill someone, you murder someone, you commit adultery. There are certain sins that it's a capital offense. But over here, imagine, who went to enjoy the party? First of all, enjoying a party of a kosher party. It wasn't as if they ate not kosher, and even if they did eat not kosher, it's also not a capital offense. Who ate at this party? Some adults. The kids have to die. The whole thing doesn't sound reasonable. So I want to share with you something that the Rebbe, in one of his essays on Purim, explains. This was not a punishment. God wasn't punishing the Jewish people. So what was it? You have to go back and understand the relationship between the Jewish people and the nations around us. The sages give the example, they compare it to a sheep among 70 wolves. The Jewish people living in the world, amongst the nations of the world, is compared to a sheep among 70 wolves. Can you imagine you put a sheep among 70 wolves? What will happen to that sheep? Within minutes it'll be devoured by the wolves. It'll be in pieces. And now how could it be that a sheep that's among 70 wolves should not be torn to pieces? How could that be? What would it take to have a sheep survive 70 wolves? A good shepherd. That the shepherd is really watching the sheep and fends off all the wolves are attacking, and he fends them off with a stick or whatever it is. And he protects that sheep with everything he's got. In that case, if the sheep has a masterful shepherd that puts his life on the line for the sheep, it can survive the attack of the 70 wolves. Right? So if you looked at the sheep, and any objective observer would see the sheep survived after a week among 70 wolves, what would they say? Wow, that shepherd is unbelievable. And the sheep should also understand. A sheep doesn't understand, but the sheep should recognize she's alive. He's alive only because that there's a faithful shepherd that's taking care of her. But imagine the sheep forgets for a second who is protecting her, and instead begins to make the mistake that the wolf is really, they're not so bad, right? Why? Because the wolf once in a while throws a bone to the sheep. You imagine the wolf comes over to the sheep, smiles at her, and she likes it. And she gets sucked into it. Could you imagine the shepherd? What did the shepherd do at that point? You forgot who's really protecting you? You like the sheep, you like the wolf? Go, have a nice day. Yeah. You think the wolf will protect you? I'll walk away, and let's see how you survive, how you fare under those circumstances. That's exactly what happened to the Jewish people in the story of Purim. Since the day that the Jewish people became a people, after they left Egypt, even before, especially in Egypt. They were always under the attack of the 70 wolves. If it wasn't this wolf, it was a different wolf. It was some nation or other that always had their eyes on destroying the Jewish people. Unfortunately, that was our history. The reason we survived it, because there was one protector. Who was our protector? God himself. He went with his watchful eye, made sure that no matter who it was, whether it was Amalek, whether it was Egypt, the Egyptian pharaohs, whether it was the Moabites, the Edom, you name it. God, there was all these wolves that were looking to get a piece of the Jewish sheep. And God always protected us. But here, suddenly, they're living in Shushan, and they get an invitation to the king's palace. So now I want you to pay attention to the words of the rabbis. The rabbis don't say that the decree of annihilation was passed against them because they ate from the party of the banquet of Achashverosh. Because eating alone wasn't a problem, because it was kosher. What was the problem? And here's the words, the key words. Nehenu, they enjoyed it. They took pleasure in that banquet. What is the meaning of this pleasure? What's the pleasure? I think what the rabbis are trying to say is that they forgot for a moment. Why did they go to that banquet? Why did they have such pleasure in going to that party? Because they felt that they got to rub shoulders with the king. After all, they live in his kingdom. And he's the one that if you don't, then you're going to be, in trouble, and he won't like you, and he won't this, and he won't that. And after all, he's the one that, he has an army, he'll protect us, and he'll be nice to us, and he'll be good to us, and so on. So it's like that sheep that's for a moment forgot that it's the shepherd that really is protecting her from the wolves. And for a moment, she went and she got sucked into the wolf's smile. And that happens once, and it happens again. Then finally the shepherd says, if you think you can do better with the wolves and they'll protect you, try it. I'll walk away for 10 minutes and see how you do. That's what happened over here. God didn't punish them. He says, you want the protection from Achashverosh rather than from me. And you're enjoying this closeness and this camaraderie with the worst of the worst. Let's see how you do under them. In other words, you're looking for a natural. You want to live within within the parameters of nature. The natural world is there's a king, he passes decrees, and you're part of his kingdom, and you got to do the right thing with him, and if you do, and you pay your taxes, he'll take care of you, and so on. That never worked for the Jewish people, unfortunately. They paid taxes in Egypt, and look what happened. They paid taxes in wherever. No one was interested in their taxes. No one was interested in their good behavior. In other words, nothing wrong with doing good behavior. Wherever you live, you should be a good citizen. But that didn't do it for us. At the end of the day, we were a sheep among 70 wolves. And a wolf is never going to get along with a sheep. It's prey. Unless you have a good shepherd that's protecting you. But the Jewish people forgot for a moment. They got too comfortable within the natural reality, which Jews are not a natural phenomenon. Jews are supernatural. Their protection, their survival, their everything about them, which we learned on Friday morning in the Sikha. Their very birth is a miraculous birth. Everything about them is birth. Who's the first Jew that was born? Yitzchak. The first born Jew was Isaac. When was he born? How? In what circumstances was his birth? A miraculous circumstance. His mother was 90. His father was 100. So the very existence of the Jewish people is a miracle, not a natural phenomenon. The Jews in Shushan were trying their hardest to fit into the natural reality and surroundings. And for a moment forgot that there's a shepherd and these are wolves. So God says, you know what? Good, fine. You want Achashverosh's protection rather than mine? No problem. So God looked away from him and he blinked. You know what happens when God blinks? He closes his eyes. The wolves see the sheep and they see meat for lunch. They see a good lunch. And that's what Achashverosh saw and that's what Haman saw. So it's not that they punished them because they enjoyed, because they did some sin. It wasn't so much a punishment, it was a natural reaction. It was almost like the Jews were asking to be left alone to the forces of nature. So God left them alone. And he said to them, you think the force of nature can do it for you? Try. And when we tried, look what happened. What's the lesson for all this? And that's why when Esther realized that this is what's happening, what did she tell Mordechai the first thing? I'll go to the king if you think it. I realize that it's my moment, I have to do this. But let's do what we can to make it work. What did she do?
Fast.
So if what would you do? Well, the regular person would say, I'm going to the king, he hasn't called me in 30 days, he's not really interested in me. Let me try to make him interested in me. How does a wife make her husband interested in him, especially a Achashverosh husband, which is probably...
Sexually.
Exactly, so she would now make herself look the best. But she knew that this problem that the Jewish people had and their survival and the nullification of this decree had nothing. It was not going to happen within the confines and the parameters of nature. On the contrary, that was why they, to begin with, threatened, was because they were too natural about themselves. So 1 second, so I just want to finish. Okay. So she said to Mordechai, we need to connect that. We have to reconnect to the shepherd. How do you reconnect to the shepherd? You show him that that we recognize that our protection comes from you. How do you get protection from God? You serve him. You do his mitzvahs. You get closer to him. How do you get close to him in a moment like this when you messed up? You fast, you repent. So she goes and institutes a fast day for 3 days. Coming to the king like that certainly was not a natural way to arouse his interest in her. But you know what happened? When they reconnected to the shepherd, everything starts becoming normal. Everything starts falling into place again. God pulls the string and gets Achashverosh to be excited about Esther, even though she looks a wreck. She must have looked a wreck. But Achashverosh was interested anyway. And its beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So Hashem made it that that moment she should find favor in his eyes. And then everything just worked out perfectly. This is a lesson in life. Does this mean that we shouldn't try to be good citizens? Try to work on behalf of the Jewish people in the halls of power? Yes, but don't get too caught up with it.
It seems like the king down deep was a good person because he remembered Mordechai and what he did.
It's very interesting that you say that.
Wouldn't even think of that.
It's very interesting you say that.
Secondly, when did he ever find out that Esther was Jewish?
Yeah, by the second party, she tells him, I'm Jewish, and this man Haman is trying to annihilate me. That's what enraged the king. She suddenly realized, my king he wants to kill the queen. Yeah. So he had Haman hung, and that was the end of it.
Oh, another thing, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Megillah. What does it mean, the word Megillah?
Megillah means a scroll. A scroll.
Scroll.
And they wrote the story of Esther and Mordechai in a scroll. And they sent it out to all the communities of Israel and instituted that it should be a holiday and they should read it every year. So we read the scroll every year on Purim.
Because there's an expression, in Jewish, something about a Megillah, you're a Megillah.
A ganze Megillah. It's a long story.
Right.
Because
you've heard that.
Yeah, because the Megillah is a long story. It's 10 chapters, it takes a half hour to read.
Throughout the years, I never knew what it meant.
But I'll show you another thing. You say Achashverosh was a nice man.
One more thought before I forget it. Did they ever have children?
Who?
Esther and the
Yes,
king.
yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
Okay, my question...
Hold on, let me share with you something. You say that Achashverosh was a nice man. The truth is, at the end of the Megillah, it tells us that Achashverosh did treat the Jewish people with a new attitude. Esther and Mordechai became very powerful, and Achashverosh was very nice to them. So the Gemara actually is a fascinating parable that the Talmud gives that the Medrash gives for the story of Purim. What happened over there was, and I'll do this quick, Haman comes to Achashverosh and tells him, these people, you got to annihilate them. They're no good for you. They're bloodsuckers. They dry up suck up the whole economy, or whatever. He gave them all, whatever, it's like the protocols of the elders of Zion. It's the same story. He said it in different words. He said it in Persian instead of in English, instead of German. Mm-hmm. But it's the same story. And Achashverosh says, sure, you want to kill them? No problem. I don't even need you. He tried to buy him off with 10,000 silver coins. He said, I'll give you 10,000 silver coins because at the end of the day, you kill all the Jews, it's going to affect the economy, right? They're good. They do add to the economy. You get rid of them, it's going to be the economy is going to take a hit. So Haman, he takes care of that from the beginning. He says, don't worry, the economy I'll give you 10,000 gold, silver talents. It's a massive amount of money. So that he shouldn't be able to say, well, the economy is going to suffer if I kill the Jews. He took care of that too. And Achashverosh says, no, you can keep your money and you can kill the Jews. So the Talmud gives the following, the sages give the following parable for this. It says like this: there were two people that had two fields. Each one owned a field. And in one of them, the field had a big hole in it, a ditch. The other guy across the street had a big field, and he had in the middle of the field was this big mound of earth, plus a big pile of earth and stones and so on. And the guy that had the ditch was looking, I can't plow my field, I can't do anything with my field before I fill it up. The guy with the mounds had the same thought, I can't do anything with my field till I get rid of this mound. One day these two people meet in the park. They're sitting on a park bench, and one tells the other, I got a problem. I have a big mound in my field, or big ditch. He says, you have a big ditch? I have the perfect solution. I have a big mound. Pick up the whole mound and put it into your ditch. We'll both have, level ground. Yeah. And in that way, the Talmud explains what happened between Haman and Achashverosh. They both wanted to kill the Jewish people. Haman comes and says, Achashverosh, can I kill them? He says, sure, you can kill them. In other words, he has a ditch, he has a mound. So they made peace. They said, no problem. Get rid of the Jews. It'll be happy for everyone. But the question is, what is the meaning of this? Why was Achashverosh, the Jews were to them like a mound, and to Haman, the Jews were to him like a ditch? There's every word in the sages, in the books, when they give a parable like this, everything is exact, precise. There got to be meaning in that. What's the meaning of this? So the Rebbe in the Fabring in 1965 on Purim explained it as follows. There are two reasons, there are two types of anti-Semites in this world. It's very relevant, by the way. It's still true till today. There are anti-Semites like Hitler or like Haman. You know why they hate Jews, these people? Hitler and Haman hated the Jew because we created a ditch, a hole in their heart. We remind Haman every day and Hitler, you have to be a moral person. You can't just be an evil person. There's real morality, there's absolute morality. Morality is not relative. There's a God in this world, and there's a country. We remind that they're not at peace as long as there are Jews, because they don't like to be told that you have to be a good person. Relative morality. We created a ditch in their heart. There's a hole in their heart. They're not complete. As long as they see a Jew, they're enraged, because we remind them that you got to be a mensch, you have to be a good person. But then there's another kind of anti-Semite. We're a mound. there are a lot of people in this world, non-Jews, that don't understand the Jewish people. They don't know that. We're not a ditch. It's not a ditch for them. It's a mound. What is a mound?
Jeff, I sent where's the bagels?
We're a mound. Why are we a mound? Listen to this.
I told you. See?
We're a mound. Listen, let me finish the thought. We're a mound. Why? They don't understand us. They know that the Jewish people are chosen. They learned the Bible. They know all that. They know that the Jewish people are spiritual people. So they wonder, what are we doing in this physical earth? We're taking up space in a world that doesn't really, this is not the world for the Jews. The Jews are spiritual. We belong in heaven. And when the Jews are down here and they're all over the place, they see us like a mound, like, they keep bumping into us like you bump into a mound. We don't create a ditch in their heart. Well, that's not the Hitler type of anti-Semite.
I apologize.
No problem.
I'm just going to ask you one thing. Do we have lunch and learn Wednesday?
Yeah,
we
sure.
Do. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody.
We have, it's a different kind of anti-Semite. You know who I would compare this to? Perhaps some of the UN nations. Or the State Department, maybe. The people that have a certain negative attitude towards the Jewish people, maybe towards Israel. I'm not saying everyone. Some of them are really bad. But some people are just bad. They just hate Jews because they're Jews. But some people, they don't hate Jews because we have long noses. They just don't understand us. They don't understand us. We're a mound. We're taking. It's like, why are you here? You have a greater mission. You belong in heaven. They're willing to give us a ticket there. In other words, there are two worlds. There's the world of the rest of the world, this physical world, and there's the world of heaven, which is the Jewish people. We're a Jewish people. We're a holy people. Holiness is in heaven. They don't know why we're here. They don't understand what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. What do you do with such people? That was Achashverosh. Achashverosh wasn't the type of anti-Semite that the minute he looked at a Jew, he hated him with all his guts. We could cause a hole in his heart. We didn't cause a hole in his heart. Because Achashverosh could be a good person if you teach him how to be one. He was a lost soul. He didn't know right from wrong. You teach him right from wrong, he's willing to listen. When Esther and Mordechai taught him right from wrong, he listened. They turned him around. There are people that are very, very, they misunderstand the Jewish people. They misunderstand. Jesse Helms was one such person. Remember Jesse Helms? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was a congressman, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Georgia. Mm-hmm. He was very anti-Israel in the 70s, the 60s, 70s. And then the Rebbe's approach towards him was, work with him. Respect him. And the other Jewish leaders never understood. What are you doing? This guy's anti-Israel. Why are you? Rebbe said, watch what happens. Alan Dershowitz tells the story. He wrote to the Rebbe a letter, how dare you, show favor, show respect to this anti-Jew. And the Rebbe said, watch him in 5-10 years. Jesse Helms became the biggest supporter of Israel the Congress had, or one of them, because he was the type of anti-Jew of the likes of Achashverosh. He didn't understand us. A mound is like, it's taking up space, right? What's a mound? It takes up space. Yeah. But if you can explain why I'm here, what we're all about, what our mission in this world is, he'll welcome you. That's what happened with Achashverosh. That was the difference between Haman and Achashverosh, Hitler and these people. Hitler, that type of anti-Semite, you have to eliminate. You have to get rid of such anti-Semites. Their place is on the gallows. That's the only place for them, is on the gallows. But the other type of people that are discomforted with the Jew, is not because they inherently or they hate us because for no reason. It's a mound. You can turn them around. You can explain to them with patience what the mission of the Jewish people is. And if you do, they may respect you one day, and they will. And that's how we deal with those. Those are not the people you throw to the dogs or you put them in the gallows. No, you don't hang them. Those are not the Hitlers of the world. And the Rebbe always taught us that you have to always remember one thing. The Purim story teaches you two things. Never put your trust in man and a wolf. A sheep can never trust a wolf ultimately. You can try to respect them. You can try to be there and treat them with respect. And we have to pay your taxes, be a good citizen, even go and work on behalf, try to influence in government and so on and so forth. But never lose sight of really where the Jewish people's salvation comes from. Israel has to have diplomatic relations with the whole world. Yeah. They have to, and they should. But where does their real protection come from? From God. So therefore, if they mess up and they're getting too comfortable in the halls of the UN and the halls of Washington and such places to the point where they begin to forget and violate the norms of the Torah and the source of the real source of protection, meaning God Himself. God says, you want to throw yourself under the laws of nature? Try it. We can never survive under the laws of nature. And naturally, wolves devour sheep. That's the nature. A wolf is going to destroy a sheep. Supernatural is when a wolf somehow becomes friendly with a sheep. But that can only happen when you have a real good shepherd on your side. So we can never forget that, and Esther didn't. She realized that the antenna, their lifeline to heaven, was cut. So that was the first thing they had to repair. And that happens through fasting and repentance. The rest will happen. And the rest did happen. It's such a tremendous lesson.
Yeah, but why then was so few Jews, when the Second Temple was built, that so few Jews came from Persia?
Let me ask you something. In 1948, Israel was established. How many Jews went from America to live in Israel?
It's true.
You get comfortable here.
Yeah. They got comfortable there.
It's not the same. Building the temple should have attracted more, but it says that Ezra, indeed, was very upset with the Jewish people, and he punished them for this. Took away the rights of the Levites and so on because they didn't come. All kinds of things that happened. Yeah, it wasn't a good thing.
No.
But that's one of the lessons that we learn from Purim, that you can never forget who you are, who's your real lifeline, and you'll survive. Your survival comes not from any good, even as good as they are. It's always going to be subject to change, fluctuations. You can never really rely on it. If you rely on God, then you can use the means that God put at your disposal to make your life a better life. Get a job, rub shoulders with the right people in Washington, but don't get too carried away with that. That was the mistake the Jews had made in Shushan. Nehenu, they enjoyed this relationship too much. Yeah. They got all caught up with it, to the exclusion of even for men to sacrifice their relationship with God, because they should not have been by that banquet. That banquet was nothing but a desecration of God's name. The temples, as I said, he made a display of all the temples, the temple treasury and all those things that were there. It was a disgrace. And the Jews knew it was going to be a disgrace. So they weighed two things, God or Achashverosh. They picked Achashverosh instead of God. You picked the wolf instead of the shepherd. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen?
It's very profound.
So we have to remember that all the time. It's true in our individual lives as well. How much effort and reliance. Let's talk about our livelihood. How much reliance do we have on our business? Sure, you need a job. If you don't have a job, you're not going to have a parnasa. You're not going to have a livelihood. But where does your livelihood come from? Like the protection of the Jewish people. Where does the protection come from? God. How does he want you to protect yourself? Yes, have good relations with the government, but not at the expense of God, at your real lifeline. Same thing with parnasa. Imagine you're going to go get a parnasa, you're going to cheat in parnasa. You're going to expect God to bless your parnasa that way. Or you work on Shabbos. In other words, yes, those are vessels. Those are the ways we get God's blessing. But where do we get the real parnasa is God's blessing. So for that you have to make the proper vessel, not, God forbid, to violate his will. And when we do, it's like you're putting yourself in the hands of a wolf. You'll never get blessing from that. You're going to get chopped into pieces from that. And that's exactly what the story of Purim teaches us. To never forget that our real friend is in heaven, not in Washington. Now, it's nice to have a good friend in Washington, don't get me wrong, and in London and in Paris and wherever else. But that's the vessel.
That's secondary.
That's the vessel.
It's all in addition.
That's the way we're going to get God's blessing, God's protection. If we try to explain to them who we are, that they shouldn't see us as a mound. And you could explain them why we're not a mound. They should make peace with the fact that we're here. Even though they keep bumping into us, right? Like in you bump into the mound. They don't quite understand us all the time. Explain it to them in English, in simple words, in simple language. They are willing to listen. Achashverosh was willing to listen. When you told him the right words, he listened. And he was brought around. Not every anti-Semite has to remain an anti-Semite. Some of them see us as a ditch. Those you can never change around. Those you have to hang on the gallows. The ones that see us as a mound, you can change. And we've been doing that for thousands of years with the help of God. Happy Purim, everyone.